Hi, good afternoon. I'm coming to you live from the B&H event space in Manhattan, and my name is Marie Segaris, and I'm here to talk to you about 7 income streams for creative entrepreneurs. A little bit about myself. I've been a creative business owner for about 11 years. I'm a digital content creator in the crafts industry, so I predominantly do crochet and knitting, patterns, sewing tutorials, Cricut crafts, and other crafty tutorials. And as part of that business, I have myself quite a few different income streams, which I will talk about today. And I am a proud collaborator with B&H Photo today. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to go through today. We're going to talk about why you might want to have multiple income streams. And then I'm going to share 7 income streams that creative entrepreneurs can adapt to fit their own business model. And then I'm going to touch a little bit about branding and marketing and then answer questions. Throughout, we'll have different activities where you can pause and look at how this might relate to your own specific business so that we don't get too far down the line before you can think about how it might apply to you. So why multiple income streams? Well, the most common reason is because it helps to standardize cash flow throughout the year. So in the audience, before we started, I talked to a few people. So for example, I know there's an events photographer in the audience and certain events are seasonal. So let's say you tend to photograph events that take place in the summer. If that's your main or sole income stream, you won't be earning income throughout the rest of the year, as an example. So one reason to have more income streams is that you can have a little bit more standardized money coming into the business throughout the year. A lot of businesses are seasonal, so this is one of the main reasons that businesses will add other income streams. Another reason is it can help mitigate the risk of relying on just one income stream. So let's say you have been selling a specific product, and for some reason that product can no longer be sold. Maybe there's a change, people aren't interested in that product, maybe the product was related to something technological and now that technology is no longer relevant. So anyway, by changing up and adding another income stream, when something like that happens, you'll still be able to have other sources of income coming in. For those people that rely on events and other activities that require them to actually physically be there, it can also help if you're sick or you have some family issues that you aren't able to actually go out and work on those specific dates. So that's another reason why you might want to consider multiple income streams. Also, you can introduce your business to new audiences. So by having one type of income stream, you may have been focusing on a certain particular audience, and by adding some other options, you may bring in some customers that hadn't been exposed to you before, so they might be interested. And at the same time, you can make your own existing customers more loyal. So they might find that, wow, this one business has all these different things that I can work with, and I love this company. I feel good about them. Usually when people are working with smaller businesses, they tend to have a closer relationship. So they may want to support your business by buying more than one different type of product or service from you. And so by you offering multiple options, you allow your loyal fans to actually support you more. So those are some of the main reasons. Now, it's not all cupcakes and rainbows. It can actually be more work, right? So obviously to launch all these different products and services and ideas, it's going to be a lot of work, especially at the beginning as you're learning new things, trying new things. Truthfully, not everything's going to work. Some things there's going to be trial and error, and you're going to discover this isn't a good fit for my business. So there can be some risk. Although there's also some income streams that are a little bit more passive. It doesn't involve you each additional sale. So once you kind of create the product or the service, you can step away from it a little bit. So that's another way to kind of manage the work. It can be more costly to implement. So if you're trying something new, you may need to purchase new software, set up a new website, work with different partners, change your equipment, go through a training program. So that can cost your business money. So you want to think about your own tolerance for risk. So I know people who, they think of a new business idea and they'll run out and spend $1,000 tomorrow buying stuff. That's not me. I'm very low risk tolerance. So I would be more likely to slowly build things over time based on kind of my ability to pay for it or fund it through how the product is going and whether it's actually building enough income. So there's different ways of adding things with your own tolerance for how much money you're willing to spend in mind. And it can also be challenging to coordinate because some of these different income streams that we're going to talk about today, they're not all for the same type of audience. So you'll have to think about, does it make sense to do this from one single brand, or do you need to have multiple brands? If you have multiple brands, you need to have multiple social media accounts, email accounts, and so on, right? So something to think about, which we'll talk a little bit more in detail on later. So I'm going to go through 7 different income streams, and as we go through each one, we'll have time to work on an activity that relates to your business. So the first one I'm going to talk about is consumer products and services. And this is any product that you might make to sell directly to an end user. So in photography, this could be, for example, a photograph, a simple photograph, family portraits that you sell to somebody. It can be photos printed on a canvas that you sell to somebody. It can also be any product you make to sell via a retailer. So maybe you are not directly selling it to the end user, you're creating it, but you're selling it through somebody else. So that's another option. It can also be something you purchase from a manufacturer or a wholesaler and resell. So for example, a couple of people in here talked about events. You might buy something as part of your events package that you then resell to the client that you are not directly producing. So it could also be digital products you sell to the end user. So how-to guides, best tips for, on your wedding day, for, from the photographer, things like that. So any kind of digital product that you can sell, or a course. It can be services, so it can be photography, it could be teaching a class face-to-face, teaching a class online. Those are also consumer products and services. And so these are kind of the main different ones to think about. When you do something like this, you can sell through your own website, or you can use other marketplaces. A lot of marketplaces now will allow you to sell things that you create. Here's just a couple of examples. So on Amazon, you can sell handmade items, you can sell products that you purchase from a manufacturer, you can sell self-published books and videos and audiobooks. Blurb, you can create your own books and sell them there. Cafe Press, you can create a lot of products that are print on demand, so it could be t-shirts, hats, mugs. That's the same with Zazzle. eBay, you can set up your own store. On Etsy, you can sell anything handmade, unique, or vintage. Gumroad is usually used for digital products, but you can actually sell physical products there as well. Shutterstock for photography. So these are just a couple of different marketplaces that you could consider for a consumer product that you might want to launch. If you decide to go through a retailer, so maybe you want to make the product but not so much sell it, right? You'd rather have somebody else do the selling for you. You can use wholesale or consignment. So when you do consignment, typically what happens is basically the retailer is agreeing to kind of hold on to your product and take care of it, and then if it sells, you get a percentage of the sale, versus wholesale where they're typically buying the product outright from you in advance. So if your product is relatively new and you don't have a very good relationship with the retailer, consignment might be less risky for them. So they might be willing to try that, whereas maybe they don't want to make a big order on your product because they're not sure it's going to sell. And then if you wanted to do online courses, there are a lot of different websites like Skillshare, Teachable, Thinkific, and Udemy that all allow you to create online courses that you can operate through their platforms. And of course, you can do local classes as well. You can collaborate with another organization. Like let's say you might work with a community center or some other local organization that might pay you to provide classes or allow you to use their space, or you rent space from them, or you can do them out of your home, out of another venue, etc. So any questions about different types of consumer products or services? Does anyone in the audience want to share a product that they are already selling that they feel successful about, a product or service? Okay, so we will go on to our activity. Those of you at home, you can just do this on your own. Those of you that are here, you have a handout, but you want to think about which new types of products or services might be right for your business, and which products or services that you already have could you sell in a different way. So for example, let's say you already are doing some type of product like prints, photo prints. Could you sell them on a different marketplace? Could you package them differently into some kind of bundle instead of an individual set? Could you create something that's customized instead of already printed, etc.? So thinking for the next couple of minutes, what might you do differently in terms of products and services? And I'll kind of walk around and talk to folks so we can get some suggestions to share with the folks at home. Okay, so somebody in the audience is saying they don't have their initial revenue stream yet. So they're kind of trying to think creatively about what should be kind of the first idea for their business. And that's something that's a good idea to keep in mind. Most businesses, even a large business, but especially not a small business, a solopreneur type business, which I'm assuming most of us in here are kind of our own business that we run, we're not going to be able to launch 7 income streams on day one, right? So we want to pick out of all these different 7, is there one that we feel the most able to implement right now, that we think we have the skills, the interest, and we can possibly market that the most effectively? And then as each income stream becomes a little bit more stable, that's when we might think about adding more, because we also don't want to get overwhelmed by doing too many different things at once. Yes?
I have a small photography business, and I'm enjoying it. I'm not making, I need more income. Mm-hmm. But I don't, I've done well in my life, so it's fine. But I would like to expand it. I was just, like I do parties, and I do portraits and LinkedIn profiles. I just got the idea from listening to you. So let's say I take a party, I usually do 200 pictures and I give it to the customer. Now I'm thinking about saying, hey, would you like to try 5 of your favorite prints, and I can make them into like a glossy or a luster,
sure,
or all these
yep,
canvas. Maybe I could add on that, and
Okay, so
maybe that would help me get more money.
Sure. So what the gentleman in the audience is sharing is that in his current business, he does parties, he does LinkedIn photography, he does portraits, and now he's thinking, well, instead of just saying, here's 200 prints from the party, he could say, pick your top 5, and I can make them on a canvas, I can turn them into thank you cards, we can put them on a t-shirt, we can do all kinds of different things with those pictures you've already taken, right? So that would be kind of a new product for you, but it's sort of within the realm of products you're already comfortable with.
Yeah.
And remember when I said earlier that one of the things about adding income streams is that it helps your customers that already like you have more reason to come back to you, right? So if I'm a person who's having my anniversary and I'm taking pictures, I'm probably going to have to send thank you cards anyway, right? People might have gotten me gifts or something. So I'm going to need cards. So if you can actually be the person I buy the cards from, that's, my way of supporting you, and it's also a little easier for me as a customer. So, and that's not a huge leap from the work that you're already doing. So that's definitely a great idea. Any other thoughts from the audience, other ideas that they might add, either products or services you're already doing well with, or ideas that you've gotten? Okay, so we'll move on to the next income stream, which is advertising and sponsorship. So one other option is you can have a business where you're predominantly essentially sharing your audience with an advertiser or a sponsor. So one way to do that is you might have a blog or a website that uses an ad network. And so some of the ones that people use, Google AdSense is usually the first one most people use because your website doesn't need to have a very large volume of traffic to use that. You can also use MediaNet, as your traffic grows larger, there's other options available like Mediavine. So essentially what you would do is you would place some code on your website or your blog, and that would put advertising in that space, and so people who visit your website or blog would see ads. This type of advertising, you don't have really control over who the advertisers are. With most ad networks, you can place limits, like you can say, I don't want tobacco products, as an example, but you can't say, don't put this company, don't put that company. So this can be a little bit challenging if you work with specific companies and you don't want to show, let's say, some of their competitors, for example. So you can also work on direct brand relationships. So you might have companies that you are already working with, or companies that are following you on social media because you're tagging them, you're using their products, and you can try to work with them for things like a sponsored post. So you would do a blog post about their product or how you use their product or including their product, a tutorial for their product, a review of their product, and they would pay you for that. The same thing you can do with video, or some type of what they call social amplification. So some companies will pay you just to share something on Instagram about them. You don't necessarily need to create a blog post, as an example. And some companies have an ambassadorship, so rather than a one-time thing, it's more of a long-term commitment, usually at least a year, where you work with that company and you do multiple sponsored posts for them. If you are not able to, or not willing to, or not sure how to start building your own direct brand relationships, there are also things called influencer networks. And so those are companies that are basically intermediaries between brands and consumers. And what they do is you would say, hey, I have this type of business, I have this presence on my website or on YouTube or on social media, and then you would kind of tell them a little bit about your business, and as companies come to them and say, we're really looking for somebody who loves photography to talk about our new camera bags, then you could apply for that particular sponsorship. So that's another way to do that. So with advertising and sponsorship, there's a couple things to keep in mind. The Federal Trade Commission has requirements related to disclosure, so you have to notify people if you are being sponsored or if you're advertising something, because it's not always clear to people. So there are requirements that you have to indicate that. And you also want to think about whether it's an exclusive or a non-exclusive relationship. So for example, some brands will say, if you are going to promote my product, you can't talk about any of my other competitors for 6 months, a year, even to compare us, right? And other companies will say, you know what, I want you to be kind of the authentic you. You should just talk about all the things that you enjoy. So if you have a preference, right, some companies you may not feel comfortable closing off relationships with other companies in order to work with them. That's something to think about. Can I actually have an exclusive relationship, or is a non-exclusive relationship a better fit? So one more thing to mention about advertising and sponsorship, not always, but often you are required to have a little bit more of an established following. A lot of companies are not necessarily willing to pay a company that's newer, that they're not so sure if they have a following. So you may either need a pretty large audience, a large volume of website visitors, or just more of an established presence in order for a company to be interested in working with you in this way. So any questions on advertising and sponsorship?
I was talking to a friend yesterday, and she does beauty care, skincare.
Yes.
But primarily, she doesn't have like a website, but she uses social media.
Yeah.
Particularly popular ones like Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
How would one go about if they were trying to do a sponsorship for the service
Yep.
that she has? how would one go about doing a sponsorship on this platform?
Yeah, great question. So the question was a friend who promotes, you said beauty products?
Yeah.
And they don't have a website or a blog. They predominantly promote themselves through social media on Instagram. So well, first of all, there are influencer networks that are specifically just for social media. And so in the same way that a person that works with beauty products could join a beauty influencer network because they have a blog or a YouTube channel, they can also join one with an Instagram presence. And then similarly, they can contact a brand directly in the same way. So they could reach out and say, usually in my experience when people go directly to brands, they start by sort of following the brand on that social network, reaching out, tagging the brand on that social network, messaging the brand, and sort of building a relationship there. And then before they would say, let's talk about sponsorship. But one of the things to think about with sponsorship is that you may want to develop what's called a media kit. It's basically kind of your statistics that you would share with the sponsor. So for example, your friend, if they're mostly on Instagram, they would probably want to highlight, how long have they been on Instagram, how often do they post, how many followers do they have, what is the kind of typical response to their post in terms of the number of views, the number of likes, the number of comments, do they share video or only photography, do they do stories, etc. And so your kind of media kit shares who you are and your numbers and your reach, but also the type of services that you provide. So for example, would she be willing to do an Instagram live or an IGTV, or does she only do static posts, right? So that would be something that would be important to convey to the brand, because depending on what they're looking for, they might be more willing or less willing to work with her based on what she can offer.
The media kit you say would be ideal to just reach out, find sponsorship.
So yes, I would say if you're going to go through the advertising and sponsorship route, it's helpful to start with a media kit. Even if you use an influencer network where they're basically doing all the communication for you, you're still going to need all your stats. Like I have this many followers, I do this, I do that. And it's just helpful to have your media kit because you're more comfortable once you see all the information in front of you in conveying it to a possible future sponsor. Other questions about advertising or sponsorship? So for the folks at home and the people here, there's a place on your sheet. So would advertising and or sponsorship be right for your business? So again, remember with advertising, usually you don't have total control over who the companies are, whereas with sponsorship, you're usually working directly with one company or multiple companies or through their intermediary, so you're sort of selecting the companies you work with. And are there any particular relationships you would want to cultivate? So that could be with, again, we have a lot of photography folks here, so that could be with a camera company, that could be with a retailer like B&H, that could be a company that provides tripods, bags, etc., right? Right, it could be in fashion. So if you do fashion photography, if you do event photography, it could be, a restaurant even, right? That you do a lot of events at. It could be all kinds of different companies. So think a little bit outside of the box and take a moment to see if there's any relationships you think would be worth cultivating in terms of future sponsorships or sponsorships that you could do right now.
I mean, on my Instagram right now, like I have about 7,000 followers, and I'm following a lot more. But I get all these businesses that are actually selling stuff,
Mm-hmm.
To my followers.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and you can like right away you can just click and buy. Like they have all these products.
Yeah.
It's usually clothing and eyewear and
So
bags and stuff.
So just let me repeat it for the audience. So he's saying that on his Instagram right now he has 7,000 or so followers, and he's seeing other companies that are actually selling products to his audience. So how are they doing that? Through comments, or how are they?
They just actually have an actual advertise.
Oh, you mean through their own ads?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Their own ads,
Mhm.
yes.
Okay.
But I'm actually connected to them as well. Like
Sure.
yeah.
So you're seeing their ads as
Yeah.
well as your audience may be seeing their ads as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can buy right away.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you do advertising on Instagram, you can buy directly through that link. So, to go back to this point, if one of those companies said, wow, you have 7,000 followers and they're the specific type of person I'm looking for, right? Because you have 100,000 followers, 5 followers, if they're not the person the company's looking for, it's not necessarily so relevant, but your audience is exactly aligned with them. They might say, can you do the ad? We'll pay you to put together the photography for the ad, as an example, or for you to do a sponsored post where you say, hey, I'm working with this company, here's their product, this is how you buy it, and that kind of thing. So that's an option definitely, as your audience especially is fairly large. Other questions or thoughts about the advertising and sponsorship? Is there anybody in the audience who feels like this might be a good fit for their business, either advertising or sponsorship?
I don't know if this falls under it because every time I visit a hotel, I see photography, and some nicer hotels will have some more interesting photography
Sure.
on the walls and everything, and I'm like I don't know if that fits under this category.
That's a great question. I would probably put that in another category. The question was about when you go to a nice hotel, you see a lot of photography or artwork, and maybe selling some of your work to a hotel, a chain or a local hotel might be an option. I would actually put that under business to business services, which we'll get to in a little bit, but I think that's a great idea for making money, and it gets your work to a different audience than maybe you could get to on your own. So, okay, so the next one I'm going to talk about is affiliate marketing. So this is basically when you earn a commission while promoting products and services that are offered by another business. So it's in a way similar to advertising, but typically with advertising you're paid on a per click basis, or you're for sponsorship you're usually paid in advance, or not necessarily in advance, you might get paid afterward, but on an agreed upon amount. Whereas with affiliate marketing it's like a usually per sale commission. So some businesses, creative businesses, also join together and they put together a bundled package. So for example, I'm going to be in one in a couple of weeks. A bunch of crochet designers are getting together and we've all put our individual patterns into one jumbo ebook, and each one of us, as we sell one, we earn a commission on the sale, even though our own product is just a small part of the book, right? So that's an example of how you can do that. So with affiliate marketing, there are also Federal Trade Commission requirements. Again, you can't just, even if people aren't paying any extra, when they click on the affiliate link, you actually have to disclose, this is an affiliate link, I can earn a commission from this. And so that's because it's kind of truth in advertising, right? People want to know that you're not just directing them towards something only because you're making a commission, but they want to feel like they understand the relationship you have. Another thing to think about with affiliate marketing, there are lots and lots and lots and lots of affiliate programs. So to go back to your friend in the beauty industry, there's tons of affiliate programs for beauty products. But you want to think about, does this make sense with what my customers want? Because most of your audience is not going to like to feel like they're being sold stuff just so you can make money. I know that's ridiculous because we're all businesses, but they feel like that's disingenuous. But if you're saying, hey, I use this product too, or I think this is a great product for this reason or that reason, then they feel a little bit more like this makes sense. So as you think about using affiliate programs, you want to think about, does this make sense for me to sell to my audience? So, as I mentioned, I'm mostly a crafts blogger, so it doesn't have to only be craft products that I can focus on. I can also talk about things like, this is an example, hand lotion, right? So if I do videos, they're usually close-ups of my hands. If my hands look great, my audience, that would make sense to them because they're seeing my hands a lot. But if I was randomly talking about breakfast cereal, it might be a stretch. Now I could say, I have so many things going on, and including working and crocheting at night, that I need this cereal to get me through the day. Maybe it works, but you got to think about, does it make sense for your audience, and are they going to just say, oh man, this person is just selling me a bunch of junk, right? By the way, B&H has an affiliate program, if that makes sense for your audience. If your audience is buying products like the stuff that B&H sells, that is one that you can consider. So if your audience is mostly, let's say, aspiring photographers and you're showing them photography tips, this might be a type of affiliate program that makes sense. So again, taking a moment either at home or those of you here in the audience, what types of products or services or businesses make sense for you to promote to your existing audience? And the best way to find out if they have an affiliate program is to type in the name of the company and affiliate program into a search engine. So, and then usually if they have one, the application will come up right away. And then, is there an opportunity, like I mentioned, for you to bundle your products or services with some other entrepreneurs where you're each earning a commission off the sale of this joint product? So take a few moments and think about that. If you have any ideas here that you might want to research later, because with the affiliate programs, there's so many different ones that, you know, it would take you a while. Even if you had like 5 companies, you'd probably have to apply to all different ones. Another thing to know actually about affiliate, you don't necessarily have to have your own website. It helps, and some of the companies require that you have a website, but many affiliate programs allow you to share affiliate links on social media, and other ones allow you to share affiliate links through your email list. Again, if it's properly disclosed, of course. Okay, let's move on to another one. This is one of my favorites, and this goes back to your question about the hotels, which is business-to-business services. So this is similar to the consumer products we talked about at the beginning, except that you're doing something with another business as your customer. And quite a few people in here mentioned freelancing, so I know there's people already doing this. It could be on a freelance basis, or you could be on a long-term contract. You might even be a part-time employee, depending on how their business is structured. And that's, you know, anything from photography, writing, social media coordination, being a virtual assistant, supporting them at an event, right? They might have a big event and you're there representing the company as, you know, an ambassador or something like that. So those are just some examples. So one thing to keep in mind with the business-to-business services, it's usually a different audience, and it's business consumer behavior is different because it's not usually one person or 2 people making a decision. It may be multiple layers of people making a decision. So if you, let's say your example of the hotel, if you wanted to put a photograph in somebody's house, you're probably talking to one person in the household that makes purchasing or interior decoration decisions. Once you get into the hotel, well, you know, does that hotel chain, does each site coordinate their own art, or is it a regional decision, a national decision? Who's the decision maker? So it's a little bit more complicated in terms of the decision making, which doesn't necessarily mean you can't do it. It's just you have to think about it a little bit differently because it's not the same approach you might take to selling a product directly to a consumer. LinkedIn is a good way of networking professionally. So you can find out a lot about who works at different companies, who works with, you know, different aspects of the business. And so that can be a way sometimes to investigate. So again, if you had a particular hotel in mind, you could probably do a little research on there in terms of, you know, who works in facilities or event management or whatever it is that you think would be the right fit with that particular company. So are there any business-to-business products or services that you think might be a good fit for your business? And which services would you, that you already have, could you sell to new customers or existing customers? So to kind of go back to your point from earlier about how you thought about this existing product that you had, right, of the photography, and now you're thinking maybe I can sell some merchandise along with it. Do you already have something that you're doing that now you could sell to a business instead of to an individual consumer? So take a few moments and work on thinking about that. Any questions, other questions from the audience about business-to-business services? Tell me your ideas. I'd love to hear them.
It's not that much different than a hotel, but like
sure.
Sometimes you, in New York City, you just walk from time to time some of these buildings and you see the artwork or the nice photography in their lobbies.
Yep.
Sometimes if you go up into their offices, some of the nicer offices have
Yeah, so a lot of buildings and a lot of offices have artwork, right? And so some of those are coordinated by the individual company, but a lot of that is done by the building management, the company that manages the building. So that's an option. And also I've seen even my primary care provider, in their office, they have photography. And they have, signs that are from a local photographer. So there's restaurants sometimes have photography. So there's a lot of different options of business locally. So that if you already are doing some kind of photography that might be of interest to that business, either maybe it's local photography, it's photography of the type of things that that business does, right? So if you are taking pet photography, then a pet food store might be interested in that. A veterinarian's office might be interested in that, but probably not, the toothpaste company wouldn't really be interested in that. So, but there's definitely room there depending on the type of photography that you do. So, like you said, it's your existing photographs. It's just thinking of a new audience. Yeah.
I guess I could keep going with restaurants and such.
Yep.
My
Restaurants.
question more so, I guess, is, and I don't know if this is pertinent to this, but how to get before that kind of person, like you said, who would do the decision making to say, we'll consider even your work.
Sure. So the question is, how do you get in front of the right person? And there's a couple of different approaches. If it's a local business, personally, I would just walk in and talk to somebody there and say, I'm a local artist. I'm interested in showing some of my work or selling some of my work here. I'm not sure what you're specifically looking for in terms of that. Is there somebody I could speak to about who does the decor in here, for example, right? And a lot of times, they'll tell you right there, well, we're actually part of a chain. This is decided at Central in, Wisconsin or something like that. Or they'll say, oh, we've never done that before. Let's talk to the manager. And like we talked about earlier, even when we mentioned retailing, a lot of companies may not necessarily be comfortable making a purchase like that if they don't already have art on display. So maybe it's kind of a consignment relationship where you say, why don't you show it, and if anyone's interested in buying it, you'll get a commission, or you can lend it to them as sort of an exhibit space. So it may be that to get your foot in the door, you'll have to try different things depending also on how big the company is and what type of budget they have for that. So a company that is larger most likely has a bigger budget than a company that is a really small kind of mom and pop business that maybe doesn't have a budget for something like that. But personally, I would say if it's local business, I would talk with them first. And if it's a national business, you might try that, or you might try looking up people on LinkedIn or doing some more research on who might be responsible for making those type of decisions for that business. Yeah.
I got another idea. I don't know how great it is, but okay, I do sweet 16s, I do birthday parties. There's a lot of halls that parents go to these places to give the parties. I could approach the business and say, I've done this, I have a lot of experience, and maybe I could offer you something, and maybe you could use my services by telling the parents stuff. The wedding halls, I could go to the wedding halls,
Sure.
introduce myself to them.
Yep.
And I don't know if they want to make a deal,
Yeah.
or they're not interested, they'll tell you right away.
Yeah, so
That type of thing.
the suggestion is if you do a lot of event photography, does it make sense to go to the venue and say, can you, as people come in and they're going to rent the space for their wedding, their party, etc., can you say, I'm on the list of recommended photographers, for example. So usually that would be a great example of a business-to-business service. Generally speaking, in that type of relationship, what I've seen is that there's some type of discounting or something like that incentivizes the business to do that, right? Because in a way, maybe they don't want to be bothered with all the event. They just want to deal with what's happening in their space. But in a way, like we talked about, if they can make it easier for their customer, right, by saying, oh yeah, we have the photographer, we have the DJ, we have the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then maybe that's beneficial to their business as well. So I think that makes perfect sense. If there's venues that you've been to already, they may remember you, especially if you've been there more than once. So talking with them, can you leave brochures? Can you leave cards? What is it that you can do that will kind of help them to recommend you to other customers. So that's still, in that sense, you're not selling it to the business unless you're saying, you know, do you want to include this in your package deal? You pay me after you get the money for the event, and I'm sort of a contractor for you, because that would be more of a business to business service. Or are you more sort of saying, let's kind of work together to create a mutually beneficial situation?
Right.
But I think both are possible for sure.
Well, no, my head's expanding a little. Like if I do a baptism, can you approach a church or?
I mean, I don't see
know.
why you can't approach a church. I don't know if they're going to want to be doing that, but you can talk to them. I
Well,
think
look-
every church is different, and
Yeah.
different, you know, faiths have different interpretations of whether commerce should be happening in the church or not. But I don't think it's, you know, you can ask. But,
Yeah.
you know, what's the worst they can say is no. We don't want to do that,
Like
right?
even though the Jewish there's bar mitzvahs,
Mhm.
bar mitzvahs, just
Sure.
go to the place and just say, people are having bar mitzvahs here all
Mhm.
the time, and
Yeah,
I think I have great recommendations.
yeah. So if you have
And then you
recommendations, that
start
helps.
talking to them.
Yeah.
Maybe they're interested. Maybe.
They might be interested in having your services work with them. Yes, sir.
Isn't the, like bundling with the venue or coupling up with the venue too, is that kind of like fall under the affiliate marketing, kind of like the bundle?
So that's a great point. You know, you may have some kind of relationship with the venue that's more like an affiliate or commission-based agreement, right? In either direction, right? They might say, well, if somebody comes to you for photography and you refer them to my space, you know, you get X% of that, or whatever, such and such dollars per referral. Or you can also have a relationship like that. You can say to them, you know, if you refer a client to me, then it will be like this percent or this much money or so on, right? So yes, you can establish a commission if you want. Again, that information usually has to be shared in some way with the customer. So you just want to be careful that you're not doing anything that's misleading to the customer in that regard. Disclosed, exactly, so that the customer doesn't feel like, wait a minute, nobody told me that if I got your photography, the venue was getting, you know, $50 or whatever it is, right? So, you know, it's something that if you're doing that, you just want to be upfront about what the situation is. Again, you want to build trust with your customers. You don't want them to be thinking you're some shady business that they can't trust, right? Okay, so those are business to business services, and for the most part, a lot of it is going to be the same type of work that you're already doing, just a different customer, maybe more layers like we talked about. Might have to talk to 3 to 4 to 5 different people before you get in front of the right person, and so on. So memberships and subscriptions. So this is usually a source of recurring income. So whether it's monthly, annually, or so on. This can be anything from magazines, class or service bundles, fill in the blank of the month club. So, you know, portrait of the month club, t-shirt of the month club, etc. Subscription boxes, really anything that people can get kind of over and over. So there's different ways to do this. You can do it as a pre-order. So you say, all right, you know, the July photography box is up. You know, I'm taking orders, and then it ships out on this date. The benefit of the pre-order is you are not expending anything until you know how many sales you have, basically. You can do a limited edition, right? So you say, I'm going to do 50 prints of the Brooklyn Bridge photograph that I took, and after that, there's, you know, it's only 50. So I'm not selling any more, right? So that has the benefit in marketing of, it's kind of like a scarcity tactic. People say, oh man, there's only 50, I better get it now, right? Or you can do a make on demand, a print on demand, or however you're producing your particular product, where as the orders come in, you're making it. A little bit less efficient usually, but lower risk, right? You can do something that's exclusively for members, or it's available to everyone. So, you know, you might have this box of the month club, and really after, you know, you sent out to your subscribers, if somebody sees it that their friend has one and they want it, you'll still send them one, right? Or you can say, nope, it's only for subscribers, so you have to subscribe to get my amazing box of the month club, whatever it is. And these could be digital products, physical products, services as well. right? So for a lot of folks in photography, many people struggle with photography, probably hard for some of the folks in this audience to imagine. But if you were to provide some kind of monthly, photography lesson or something like that, so it's a service, but it's offered on a recurring basis, right, that people sign up for in advance. That's an example of how you could do it as a service rather than as a kind of one-off, right? And the one thing to think about with memberships and subscriptions are how are you going to manage payments and refunds. It's not uncommon for people to forget that they've subscribed to something, and then after they receive it, to say, oh, I didn't want this anymore, can I send it back? So how are you going to, it's important to think about that in advance, especially with digital products. So a lot of companies will say, well, it's a digital product, you already have it, there's no refunds. And maybe that's a reasonable stance, but then people can also say, wait, nobody told me, and et cetera, and PayPal disputes and blah, blah, blah. So you have to decide how, if you want to die on that hill or not. Right, ratings, bad ratings, all of that. So thinking in advance about how you'll handle refunds, anything with a recurring payment system is a good idea. So thinking about this, do you have any products or services that you could offer as a digital or a physical membership or a subscription? And would this be for your existing customers that you already have, or would you be trying to draw in some different type of customer? So take a few moments and yes. Go for it. Share.
Well, you mentioned something, and I didn't know if this existed already. You said photography boxes or something, and I know that I've done some clothing subscriptions where they send me a box. I don't know what's going to be in it, but I give them my preferences and taste, and they put together a box and send me that. And I've done one subscription clothing service where they send me a certain type of accessories. It doesn't really matter my taste. It's just what they
what they have that month.
Sending out for the month. And by what you were saying, I guess my question is, does something like that already exist for photography?
So the question is, there's a lot of subscription boxes, and some examples were clothing, accessories. In my industry, yarn, hook and needles, pattern kits, whatever. There's tons and tons and tons. I couldn't answer you if there's already a photography one. I'm sure there is, only because there's subscription boxes for everything in the universe. But that doesn't mean that your photography subscription box isn't going to be relevant, right? So, in thinking about a photography subscription box, is this something that you want to be customized, or is this something that is more like beautiful landscape photography, or amazing animals of the year, or whatever it is, right? Swimsuit models, etc. What is the thing that, besides the fact that it's photography, is there something coherent that pieces it together, or is it more like the accessory box you're describing, where it's kind of like random stuff, right? So maybe for the summer, you have a beach theme and there's a beach photograph, but you also put in a towel or something, right? So you can think about what other things, if you did a physical subscription box, what might make sense to be included in that. You can also think about things that your photography could go on. So again, like cards, phone cases, shirts, hats, etc. There's a lot of products that could have photography on them that you could have a reason for people to receive on a monthly or quarterly basis. So,
and maybe this is a little extra personal, but it's like I just take so much. I do, especially with digital. I try to be more conservative with my film, but it takes so much stuff and then a lot of stuff I end up liking, and I thought about it as an idea of like, hey, I just be on this journey with me, and I'll send you my favorite shots of the month.
Sure. So he's suggesting maybe like a favorite pictures of the month. It could be in a booklet or screensavers. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can package up photography. Prints, right? Print onto canvas. Again, clothing. Many companies now make it pretty easy to print stuff onto things, right? So that's definitely an option. Other questions or thoughts from the audience around different types of subscriptions? So, I mean, there are people that love physical subscriptions because they like getting stuff in the mail. The logistics of it can be challenging depending on how big the subscription is. So, you know, there's a pro and a con. If you have a very small group, on the downside, it probably costs you more to produce every individual thing, right? There's no economies of scale. But if you have a huge subscription, it becomes like unmanageable for one person. You actually need a lot of people involved, and maybe your business isn't ready to expand that much. So some people like to start with more of a digital subscription because they can sort of control it a little bit better. But some people feel like if they do, like I mentioned, the limited edition, so they know they're not going to make more than 50 of these, you know, so they're not going to be at the point where they can't get to the post office because they have so many things, they can't fit it in any vehicle or something like that, right? So memberships and subscriptions. So kind of related, let's talk about crowdfunding, and this is basically raising small amounts of money from a large amount of people. And so there are a couple of different platforms that I'm going to talk about. Patreon is a membership platform, and it's basically to create ongoing support for creative businesses. So it's like a membership model where people can sign up to support you as an artist, as a creative person, and depending on how much money that they give each month, you can award kind of different perks to them. So I've seen this used with all types of creative businesses successfully, and people will have, you know, anything from, let's say, $1 a month up through, you know, hundreds of dollars a month. And what most companies that I've seen success here are doing is they offer prizes or sort of perks for people that are making certain size of donations, but also if they collectively reach a certain size of donation. So, for example, I know a very successful podcaster where she said, if I can make, I think it was $200 a month, she would then do an extra podcast episode. So, you know, she didn't ask any one person to give $200, but if many people could collectively come together and do that, then everyone would benefit from this extra episode, for example. So if you do video or photography things that you can offer to everyone in some sense, right? Like a digital print rather than a physical print. Can you say, hey, everybody, if we get to this level, we can all benefit from that. Other things that I've seen people do is, you know, at a certain level, they offer some type of special newsletter. So kind of like you mentioned, telling a little bit more about your journey. So this is where I was when I took this picture. This is the backstory of it. You know, this is the lighting that I used. Here's the equipment. Here's the behind the scenes of what I was doing. How did I get the shot? All that kind of stuff. And so that's something to think about as well. Now, if you have a specific product that you want to sell, let's say you're starting your new t-shirt company that has your photographs on it, then you might want to use Kickstarter or Indiegogo because they're a little bit more oriented toward a kind of one-time relationship that's a product launch or getting pre-orders. So again, I talked about, you know, many of us are risk averse as small businesses. We don't want to run out and print 7,000 shirts and then only one of them gets sold. So we would rather say, hey, can I sell 7,000 shirts? If I can, then I'm going to go print them, right? Because I also have the cash to get them printed at a lower price, right? So those are good options for that. And the same way you can have levels. So people contribute this much, they get the t-shirt, they do this much, it's a signed t-shirt, this much, it's a thank you card, etc., right? So you can have different levels of how much money that they're contributing and what their kind of rewards and perks are. So one of the benefits of crowdfunding is it's bringing people in that like your company and you already, and it's allowing them to support you. So you may have people that already support you, but it's like, how many weddings are they having? Just the one, hopefully. So they can't keep, you know, bringing you back for the wedding photography, but maybe there's another way that they can support you on a more ongoing basis, and so that's an option. You can also offer things that are exclusively only for them, and so obviously people like feeling special. That enhances that feeling of having a connection with you and your company. When you are literally the company, right, because you're the one person, that kind of builds that loyalty. You can also think about working with other businesses for some of the perks. So it may not all be things that you are producing yourself, right? So what are related products that somebody that would want your beautiful photo print series, maybe they need frames, I'm guessing, right? So if they get to a certain point, do they get a discount on frames from so-and-so frame store, right, that you're working with together? So thinking about how can you bring in other businesses you'll kind of mutually be working together for your mutual success. And one thing I would advise is to avoid overcommitting. I've seen some people get pretty wild with the perks, and then what happens is they get overwhelmed and they're not able to deliver in a timely way, and then people get angry, and you take this group of people that was trying to support you, and you make them mad. So thinking about what is realistic for this amount of money. So like I said, with this podcaster that I mentioned, she added one additional episode for a certain amount. Later, she decided, okay, I'm going to up the amount and I'll do 2 additional episodes if it's for that. If it's for an even higher amount, I'll do a private episode only for people that are my Patreon subscribers. But she didn't put that all out at once. It's like she added something and said, okay, I can handle this, let me add something else. Versus saying, if you do this, I'm going to come to your house and deliver it by hand and, have dinner with you and all these things that you may not be able to achieve, right? So in terms of crowdfunding, do you have a new product or idea that crowdfunding can help to launch? Or do you have an idea for an ongoing relationship with your fans through Patreon? So let's take a few moments to think about this. And if anybody has questions about crowdfunding, I'm happy to answer those as well. This is definitely an area that a lot more creative people, I think, are looking into because, it's difficult to have a steady income throughout the year. And this is a way that, your most truest fans that really want to support you can kind of, especially with Patreon, can contribute on a monthly basis. So it's more of a regular source of income.
Do they help you put the campaign together?
So the question is if Patreon helps you put the campaign together. They have resources that give you suggestions on how to put together your Patreon page. I don't think that they literally help you put it together, but they give some examples. They show other creators what they've done, so you can look through that.
Is there another place to go to learn about that in particular? Because I think that may be, especially for maybe people who are launching something new, don't know stick about how to do it successfully and be able to have because some they come and
Sure.
flop.
Sure. So the question is, are there ways to find out about how to do a successful crowdfunding campaign? So they're kind of different approaches. The Patreon is more of a monthly ongoing basis versus the Kickstarter Indiegogo, which is more like, I have this new product coming out, can you help me fund it? And then that's kind of the end. I mean, maybe you have another product later, but it's not as much of an ongoing relationship. All of those different websites do have information for creators on how to set up a successful campaign. There's a lot of stuff online. If you search how to set up a successful crowdfunding campaign, you'll get a lot of different suggestions. I think the main things to keep in mind that I've seen work are people like video, just like with anything else. So if you're gonna say, hey, this is my product or my service or this is who I am, people like to see video if they can. Having different levels of commitment. So everything from the really small, $1, $5 up through, not everything is like, give me $200, because that's not where most people are coming from in a crowdfunding campaign. And then the perks should be differentiated as well. So if it's $1, maybe it's just a little email thank you, but if it's, $200, it's something else, whatever it is. And then the other thing is being responsive to people. And with Kickstarter and with Indiegogo, you can establish in advance if the project is not going to happen if it doesn't get fully funded. So let's say you need $7,000 and you only raise $5,000, you can say, you know what, I can't do this with 5,000. Thanks everybody, but here's your money back. And you don't have the money, but you also don't owe them anything. So that's another thing to think about, is being realistic about what it is that it costs you to do something, so that if you're setting up a campaign, you don't take the money and then realize, oh, actually I needed more and this wasn't enough, and then people are dissatisfied and angry. Other questions about crowdfunding? Okay, so events is another option. So events, that could be seminars, conferences, competitions, juried shows, all types of different events. You would earn income from ticket sales, vendor fees if you're charging other people to exhibit there, food and beverage sales, merchandise, etc. And you can also have, oops, that just flew by real fast. You could also have virtual events. It's not only face-to-face events. And there are a lot of ways that you can host a virtual event now. You can use a lot of those different teaching platforms that I mentioned before. You could also do like a Facebook group live or something like that. So there's many different ways to host a virtual event as well. So one of the challenges with events, they can be costly and difficult to plan. So if you're not a planner, this is maybe not the greatest income source for you, because you probably have to hire a lot of people to pull off a successful event. And it can require a lot of coordination. However, you know, a lot of times people like coming together to do something. And, you know, certainly around creativity is something that people get excited about. So that can be an option as well. So in thinking about events, do you have anybody have an event idea? Something they think that would make sense with their business?
Not that original, but like an art show.
An art show, right. An art show is a great event, right? So you would probably need other artists, or you might do one yourself, but you might want to get a bunch of different artists. You probably need a venue, you know, all of those kind of different things, right? Yeah.
And I know of, there have been some art shows that charge for entry.
Yes.
But they want, maybe, I think that's a way to get serious buyers, that somebody would only charge for entry if they were likely serious.
Right. So he's saying that some art shows charge for entry, and the idea is that it can also be a way of screening out for more serious buyers. So I think one thing to think about with the event is the event itself what you're charging for, or are you also selling something at the event, right? So some art shows, you know, you're not, like, we're thinking of it as you're saying buy my work, right? So in that case, oftentimes there would be a lower entry fee because you're trying to get people to buy the work. But if the event itself is what's being sold, like the experience of the event, then you would probably charge a higher entry fee, but they might get something more with it, like food or drinks, for example. So that they might not necessarily get from going to another art show. So an event is also, it's an experience, is what you're really selling to people, right? So being at this event, whether it's a virtual event or a face-to-face event, that's kind of the product, so to speak, that's being sold. So yeah, that you would want to think about, what's the true purpose? Is it to get buyers in here to purchase artwork, or is it to have an experience of being among these beautiful pictures while also socializing or doing something else? And so then that would help you figure out how you're going to price it. And of course, you'd have to think of the expenses to hold the event also, right? Because the space and whatever staffing that you have and advertising and all that. Okay. Other thoughts or ideas about the events? Okay, so let's just go through these really quickly, the 7 income streams that we touched upon. So those were consumer products and services. That was anything we're going to sell directly or through a retailer to an end customer. That can be any type of photography service or product that we might want to sell. Advertising and sponsorship, that's when we're working with a company who's basically paying us to have access to our audience. The audience that we have is similar to the audience they want to sell products to. Affiliate marketing, that's when we earn a commission by referring somebody to another business to make a purchase from them. Business to business services, so that's any kind of service or product that we're selling to a company rather than to an individual. And memberships and subscriptions, those are basically ongoing products and services that people buy on a recurring basis. Crowdfunding is when we get a lot of people to contribute a little bit of money, but altogether, hopefully it's a large amount of money, and that helps to support us. And then events are an experience that we're planning for people, and we can earn income in a few different ways from the events. So in the room right now, how many people, just by show of hands, are selling already products and services directly to consumers? Okay. And how many people are, anybody using advertising and sponsorship already? Doing your own advertising, right? Okay. Anybody using affiliate marketing? How about business to business? Anybody selling a service to a business right now? Memberships and subscriptions? Crowdfunding? Events? So we have a lot of room for expansion, which is good. Most people that are sort of solopreneurs, they usually start either with consumer products or business-to-business services. That's been my experience. And then they usually start with the one thing that they're the most confident with, and then they kind of add stuff to their business over time. You know, as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to become overwhelmed. Like the first day of your business, you don't want to have 75 different products and services and 100 different customer groups, and it's just too much, right? So, but at the same time, you don't want to be totally reliant on one thing because it's just not stable for your business in the long term, either because of seasonality or, you know, you're not available for some reason, etc. So, thinking about branding and marketing. So, there's two main approaches to a company that has more than one product. It's called house of brands versus the branded house. So, the house of brands would be something like, if you think about PepsiCo, they sell a lot of different things that are not Pepsi, right? There's probably food that you've eaten you had no idea it was owned by PepsiCo, right? A branded house is where everything has the same name. So usually we think of Apple. I mean, they have a couple of other brands, but almost everything is called Apple something. So we know it's from Apple, right? So in your own business, do you need to have more than one brand? Or can everything be called whatever your business's name is? It has ripple effects, so it's important to think about. So for instance, if you go with the house of brands, you have to have multiple social media accounts, newsletters, and business identities possibly, right? Is that something you want to do or that you can manage? Or is that like, oh my gosh, too much, you know, I'm overwhelmed, go back home, don't start the other business income stream. Or is it better to have just one idea? Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, like, the gentleman up front mentioned about doing the different events about ministries.
Yes.
And sometimes, I know from experience being on both sides of the camera, that sometimes if you are having a wedding event, you want specifically a wedding photographer.
That's right.
And if it seems like that wedding photographer has their hands in too much stuff,
Sure.
you may want somebody who seems to be specifically focused on that.
Absolutely. So one of the concerns that's being raised is that a lot of people, especially in photography, they're hoping for a specialist, right? So if they want a wedding photographer, they may not be excited to go to your website and see that you're also doing, you know, soccer photography and portraits. They may be like, oh, my wedding pictures won't be the perfect, most amazing wedding pictures because you're not a quote-unquote wedding photographer. So you have to think about what your customer might prefer as well. But then you also have to think about, you know, sort of your bandwidth as a human, right? So what some people do is they may have the business under their own personal name so that maybe their social media accounts, they just have one, but they might have, let's say, a different landing page or a different main website, but they're all kind of like hosted on the same, you know, on the back end, they're all the same, but one is, you know, weddings by so-and-so, and the other one is sports by so-and-so, because then the customer can get that feeling that you really know what you're doing, but you don't have to manage 75, you know, Instagram accounts, for example. Or you may feel like These wedding people, they want only weddings. They don't want to see anything else, so I do need that separate account. So it's important to kind of think about what makes sense for your customers. This is also complicated when you do business to business and consumer services, because a lot of times when you talk to other businesses, it's a little bit more formal. It's not necessarily the tone that you want to take with regular customers. So you have to think about that too. Does it make sense to have a separate account for that or not? Or do you just do that through LinkedIn, or however you want to work it out? But it's important to think about. So my final tip, and then I'll take any questions people have, is really not to do all these things at once. There's a lot of people have many different ideas today, and I thought there were a lot of good ideas, and when you go home and think about it, you can probably come up with 10 ideas for each thing. But thinking about what skills do you have already, so what are you more likely to be successful with quickly? What things do you think your existing customers would like? So your existing customers, what kind of additional products or services would appeal to them? And then how much money can you afford to spend on this? So whether this is something that you need to slowly build, whether you can pay somebody to help you with this, whether you can use, for example, if you're going to do prints, do you need to order a big order of them, or can you do print on demand, which is more expensive per unit, but you're not putting out money in advance? So thinking through all of those aspects, sort of your skills, your risk tolerance, and the time, like how quickly you want to launch it, is really important, and not to just try to dive into 7 different income streams tomorrow, right? So that's probably too much for anybody. Okay, well, I'd like to thank you all for coming to B&H Event Space today, and hopefully if you have other questions, you can definitely feel free to come up afterwards and ask me. It's been great being here with you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.